we'll take you through some of the initial literature that we went through and the methodology and our initial findings, and then describe how our findings have transformed our understanding of this particular subject. First of all, we'll just give you the context. 2020, we all remember it. We can still remember the masks, even though they've gone, hopefully forever. This was the period when we had just entered lockdown in February, March of 2020 for the first time it was happening. And we were all online learning for the first time. Hurrah! And during that process, we were obviously talking with our family, we were talking with colleagues, and I observed something when I was undertaking these calls, that we were all having certain similarities in the backdrop, whether they were pictures, book frames, or there was something going on that, and I thought, oh, there's something happening here which is worth studying. And because I'm a digital media faculty, I understand from the literature that we go through is that people use social media to present themselves, to demonstrate their identity. And I thought, oh, this will be fun. Let's explore how people are demonstrating themselves and presenting their personalities over these Zoom calls, because I thought that would be very interesting. And we see this in Facebook. This is a couple of profile images that we use in our teaching. And we will see how creative we can all become. Spoiler is, that is not what we found at all. And that is why we had to transform our whole study. So, I'll give you the initial literature review that we went through. The study that we embarked upon is based on medium theory, which described that it's not just the technology that changes the way that that society operates, but the content that is communicated through that medium. And there's discussions that just by providing the technology itself is not sufficient. It is the way the technology is being used is worthy of study. And that's where we started from. How it's not just the fact that we are online, but what kind of content and how we are interacting with each other online. It also understands the world of digital environment is completely different to the real world, or the actual world, as we like to call it in digital media. And that on the online world, there are the bits, the code tells us what we can do, and there's different affordances of this code. The ability to transform our background, like I mentioned at the beginning, is one amazing thing that we can do in the digital environment, and something which is worth exploring.
And bringing in a psychological perspective to this, we relied on the social constructionism theory, which talks about how our understanding of the world is constructed by our assumptions about our reality. And in this case, our new reality was, this online world, this virtual world, and we wanted to think about how this affects people and how they interact on these platforms. So to tell you a little bit about the methodology for our study, we wanted to rely on this method called Photo-elicitation, which basically uses an image as a precursor to a conversation, which becomes the basis of the data that we then go on and analyze. In this case, it was the image of the participant on a Zoom call on a screen, and we wanted to use both the image of the participant and the background that they presented with. We then interviewed all our participants using a semi-structured interview, asking them questions about the way they presented themselves, and used thematic analysis to analyze that data. So just to give you a background of our data, we had quite an international panel of participants. We did 31 interviews. Again, this is at the peak of the pandemic, so everyone was in very different circumstances, very new, getting used to this new world. We had 18 participants of ours who did the interview from their bedroom, which is quite an intimate space. 8 of them from their living room. 3 of our participants actually had a designated space in their house to do the interviews. 1 person did the interview from their office, and 1 person did the interview from their car. And each of the participants came with their own kind of different family size. Some had children, some didn't, some were empty nesters, they were living alone. So all of these things impacted the way they interacted.
And so we've got the findings. We talked from a parental point of view. We have translated the parents' experiences of the online experience because it also translates into what the children will have experienced as well. So our findings from that particular perspective.
Yeah. So the first and one of the most prominent themes that emerged from our data was that of virtual privilege. We noticed how different everyone's experience was and how their real life privilege translated onto their online privilege. We saw so many different inequalities in the access to internet that people had. For example, the participant who did the interview in their car, they drove half an hour away from their house because the internet was not good at where they were living. And this also meant that people were able to express themselves creatively in very different ways depending on how privileged they were. And all of our, differences in real life, like gender roles, gender privileges, were also translated online. People who had really good backgrounds, were in really good spaces, were so much more comfortable in showing themselves online, whereas some other people were using really small spaces, like one participant was talking about doing the interview from her makeup desk. And so, this really made a difference in how confident people were online. So privilege was a very important aspect.
So taking on board on this, when we did this study, we returned back to college back in the September. On top of that perspective, I'm very concerned with bullying aspect. So I was already concerned with the students not wanting to reveal themselves. I was very happy for them not revealing themselves because perhaps they come from a poorer background and that they were trying to hide the fact that they were from an underprivileged environment. That became even more worrying when we started looking at the digital space and the security and privacy aspects, as well as logistics and issues of virtual backgrounds. We don't share our mobile numbers with our students, and we don't do that kind of communication. Yet, when we went into online learning, we were inviting a whole lot of people who we don't know, strangers, into our home, and as we saw, potentially into a bedroom environment. Which is just not where we want to be, and there's a physical sense of danger as well, because it's not just a case of people seeing where we are in the house, but it's seeing how our house is laid out, and people were concerned that this could actually result in an intruder type of a situation. And people were also concerned that they didn't want to show off the mess that was around them. I made a little joke earlier about having this virtual background in place, but I'm very grateful for that because this office is a tip right now, and I would be embarrassed to share it. And I'm sure that many of our students are hiding their background for exactly the same reason.
The other important thing that emerged from the research was how the virtual identity that people had was almost like a performance they were putting up. People decided what aspects of themselves they wanted to bring to this online platform and what they wanted to hide. For example, an untidy room, as Steve was saying earlier. And a lot of our participants were caught off guard when we asked them questions about their background and how much conscious thought they had put into creating that background. And these kinds of designs that emerged were sometimes thought of and sometimes not thought of. The real life of the participants showed up in their backgrounds. And along with that, their culture, their personal values, the way they dressed up, everything became a part of their identity, which may not always happen in real life because, in real life our meetings are often in spaces that are designed for work and for studying, but here it was in very intimate spaces. And also authenticity. So people thought they were being very authentic, but they were often not. So we had examples of things like our participants saying they've just gone from putting their laptops on their lap and just going on with the meetings as if it was nothing, whereas some of the other participants were very, very conscious about how they presented themselves, and everyone focused a lot on I'm just trying to be authentic, I want to bring my authentic self to the meetings, but people were not being necessarily as authentic as they thought they were.
So with all of this in mind, we hadn't been able to identify the personality codes or tropes that we'd hoped for. Instead, what we discovered was there was a clear gap between those who had and everybody else. And there was a clear 1% of people within the panel that were very well privileged, who had their own locations and were able to really, really survive and enjoy themselves and thrive in this environment where everyone else was basically doing the best they could and modeling through. So we went back and had a little bit more look at what else is in the literature, and we looked at topics related to the digital divide. And this has been a subject of discussion for many, many, many decades, since 1980s, 1970s, when the first telecommunications networks were started to come into play. However, what we discovered in this literature and the majority of the conversations is that we need more connections, we need more phones, we need more laptops, we need more internet access, and there is no exploration of what else might be causing a barrier to people being able to interact in the environment of the digital environment. The COVID pandemic gave us a fantastic opportunity to conduct a global experiment in a laboratory where everyone was thrown into the same problem at the same time. And this study helped us to shine some light on some of these factors. Let's see, good. So for example, these are 4 images that we might see or expect to see, and not all 4 of them look too bad, right? The top left, this young girl, nice, she looks like she's in a nice, light, airy space, but that's not ergonomically comfortable. That's not a space where you can actually do work. Right? She doesn't have a desk. She's having to operate from on the side of her bed, which is not a comfortable place, and it's not a safe space either for someone to be talking. The top right, you can perhaps see the young child studying in the backdrop, where you have the mother having to supervise the teaching environment whilst juggling a job, whilst managing food. That is not a fantastic situation, despite the fact that the environment itself looks quite nice. Bottom left, you have the 2 kids online on mobile phones. We know that even if you have a laptop in the house, you might not have a laptop for every single child available at the same time, and maybe your internet's not at the same time. And so we have the kids who are studying side by side, trying to attend classes together. And I'm sure many of you who have kids, multiple kids, have had the situation where people's classes have been clashing with each other. And then we also have the situation on the bottom right where they're trying to attend late at night for whatever reason. Maybe they're stuck out of the country and they're having to participate overseas, and again on a mobile phone versus on an optimized device. So this led us into a different theory of digital capital, which takes us into Bordeauxian type of theories of economic capital, cultural capital, blah blah blah. But in 2018, a gentleman named Ragnedda had investigated a digital model for capital. And there are different layers for this respect. So the first one is access to the internet, which is what the global model are currently looking for. Let's just give people mobile phones. Let's just give people internet access and we will solve the problem. No, I think we all realize that unless you have competence in using the technology, there are many memes where you just see tablets being used as table stabilizers. Right? We see those things, and that happens with apps. It comes with Microsoft Zooms and Teams and all of this kind. So unless there is an IT support there to support the internet and the access, then that's a problem. There's another idea: is do you have satisfaction with the digital experience and the interaction with the digital capital? Can you actually learn online? Do you have the right tools to be able to educate yourselves? And ultimately, can you use the knowledge that you learn online to achieve what the education is supposed to be about? And perhaps if it's a vocational education, you're looking for a job, can you actually do that? And the field of education, more often than not, if you don't have a large home, if you don't have enough rooms, you're already suffering from a problem of lacking secure space, not having comfort. If you don't have the original 5 capitals, then you're already at a loss. If you have weak Wi-Fi, then you have another loss. If you don't have the knowledge, and who does have the ability to use all of these technologies, then again, you're having another weakness. Do you have a curriculum which is being designed for delivery online? Then again, you have another loss. And then if all of these losses are coming together, then you have a problem of actually being able to achieve the learning outcomes of getting grades and moving forward. I've got this little hierarchy of ignorances, I suppose, rather than a hierarchy of needs. At the bottom, we have the 5 capitals, which are the economic capitals of the society, which perhaps are discussed or not discussed. Then we have this second layer, which is the internet access, where you have a lot of action. And then on top of that, you have these other elements where the knowledge and the actual outcomes of being online perhaps are not yet visible because the bottom two layers have not been addressed.